Imagine standing on the edge of a vast desert plain, golden light flickering across stone monoliths half buried in coarse sand. There is a hush, an echo of distant voices long gone, and a question that tugs gently at the mind. Are we really the first humans with the capacity to shape wonder out of earth and stone? Archaeology tells us that human civilization begins with settled farming communities, somewhere in the Fertile Crescent around 10,000 years ago. Yet, in the last few decades, discoveries and geological puzzles have quietly challenged that foundational narrative. Sites such as Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey, the enigmatic erosion patterns at Egypt's Sphinx, and ancient myths referring to sky gods or lost kingdoms hint at something more, fragments of a story that may stretch far deeper into Earth's distant past. This narrative is not sensational speculation. Rather, it is an invitation to consider what may lie beneath the soil, hidden from mainstream timelines, waiting for patient inquiry and scientific rigor. Could that have been a civilization, technologically advanced or spiritually sophisticated, that rose and fell before humans as we know them? From layers of rock that whisper of ancient deluges, to texts that speak of beings descending from the heavens, each clue asks us to look closely. In this journey, we won't build castles in the sky. We'll trace real evidence, follow the questions raised by credible researchers, and weigh how each anomaly, taken together, invites a more expansive view of history. This script will guide you across continents and epochs. We will examine the earliest monumental architecture crafted by hunter-gatherers, revisit the weathered shell of Egypt's Sphinx to discern signs of prehistoric reign, explore Plato's tale of Atlantis as both myth and historical metaphor, and ponder the Sumerian stories that propose a lineage of beings beyond our species. Our tone will remain measured. We won't indulge in dramatic leaps or unfounded claims. Instead, this will be a calm immersion into questions that open rather than close, that nudge at the margins of our understanding, and that invite both skepticism and wonder. Every step we take will strive for clarity, grounded in what we can see, measure, and reason. So breathe in the dry air, feel the grit of time beneath your feet. Together, let's unearth the possibility that before the rise of cities, before recorded kings and rulers, there may have existed another page in Earth's story, an intelligent civilization now almost lost to memory, erased not by neglect but by the passage of ages. In the arid uplands of southeastern Turkey, a modest rise of earth once went unnoticed. Shepherds passed by for generations, calling it simply Potbelly Hill. No one imagined that beneath its dusty surface lay one of the most extraordinary archaeological discoveries of the 20th century. In 1994, Klaus Schmidt, a German archaeologist working with the German Archaeological Institute, walked the site and realized that it wasn't just a natural mound. Protruding from the earth were fragments of limestone pillars, worked by human hands, shaped by tools no one expected to see from that era. What emerged from the excavation defied nearly every assumption about prehistory. Göbekli Tepe dates back to around 9,600 BCE, nearly 11,500 years ago. That alone would make it the world's oldest known megalithic structure. But it wasn't just its age that stunned researchers, it was the complexity. Massive stone pillars, some over 16 feet tall and weighing up to 20 tons, were arranged in circular and oval patterns. These T-shaped pillars often appear in pairs at the center of each circle, surrounded by additional standing stones. Each is carved with intricate reliefs, foxes, boars, snakes, cranes, lions, and abstract symbols. These were not crude markings. They showed detail, style, and an understanding of both symbolism and storytelling. The builders of Göbekli Tepe were hunter-gatherers. They had no agriculture, no permanent cities, and no wheel. And yet, they mobilized labor to carve, transport, and erect megaliths, some from quarries several kilometers away. There is no evidence of domesticated animals being used for hauling. The organization, knowledge of stoneworking, and shared vision this implies are staggering. Adding to the mystery, the site was not destroyed or abandoned. It was intentionally buried. Around 8000 BCE, just a few centuries after its peak, Göbekli Tepe was carefully filled in with debris, dirt, and refuse. This act preserved it nearly intact, but the reason behind the burial remains elusive. Was it a spiritual sealing? A shift in belief? A defense against something larger? The implications reach far beyond one site. Until Göbekli Tepe, archaeologists believed monumental architecture only emerged after the Neolithic Revolution, when humans settled into farming communities, organized surplus, and developed social hierarchies. Göbekli Tepe inverts that assumption. Here, we find monumental architecture at the beginning of the Neolithic, not the end. This suggests that religious or ritual activity may have actually preceded agriculture, not followed it. Could it be that shared belief, spirituality, mythology, or cosmology was the original glue that bound humans into collective, organized societies? That question has unsettled many researchers. Some have attempted to reframe Göbekli Tepe as a unique outlier, or proposed that its builders may have experimented with forms of proto-agriculture. Others acknowledge it as a revolutionary find, yet stop short of drawing broader conclusions. The late Klaus Schmidt believed the site was a sanctuary, a ritual complex rather than a city. There's no evidence of domestic dwellings, hearths, or everyday tools nearby. It was not a place to live. It was a place to gather, perhaps seasonally, for rituals tied to death, fertility, celestial observation, or the cycle of life. Still, we don't know who these people were. They left no written records. All we have are their stones, silent, imposing, and precise. Some scholars, such as Graham Hancock and Andrew Collins, have suggested that Göbekli Tepe may be part of a much older legacy of forgotten knowledge. Others caution that we must remain within empirical bounds. But few deny the site's significance. In 2012, UNESCO designated Göbekli Tepe a World Heritage Site. Since then, excavations have revealed less than 10% of the site. Much remains underground, untouched, waiting. If 10,000 years ago, humans were capable of such coordination, spiritual thought, and engineering, what else might have existed and been erased by time? This is not the story of aliens or myths. It's the story of real stone, real labor, and a silence deeper than time. Göbekli Tepe does not tell us what to believe, but it insists we keep asking, how old is our civilization, really? On the Giza Plateau, west of the Nile, the Great Sphinx gazes eternally eastward, its lion body and human face carved from a single limestone outcrop. For centuries, it has stood as a symbol of ancient Egypt's grandeur. According to mainstream Egyptology, the Sphinx was built around 2500 BCE during the reign of Pharaoh Khafre. But beneath the surface of that dating lies a geological mystery, one that suggests the Sphinx might be far older than conventional history allows. The theory centers not on hieroglyphs or dynastic records, but on erosion. In the early 1990s, a geologist named Robert Schoch of Boston University was invited to Giza by author John Anthony West, who had noticed unusual weathering patterns on the Sphinx and its enclosure walls. Unlike the wind-blown erosion typical of Egypt's desert climate, these deep vertical fissures suggested another culprit: water. Schoch's expertise was in geologic weathering. When he examined the Sphinx enclosure, he concluded that the erosion patterns were consistent with prolonged, heavy rainfall, not mere desert winds. But there was a problem. The last time the Giza region saw sustained, heavy rain was at the end of the last ice age, between 7000 and 9000 BCE. If Schoch's analysis is correct, then the base of the Sphinx may have been carved thousands of years earlier than previously thought, placing it in a time when mainstream archaeology tells us civilization had not yet emerged. Critics were quick to respond. Egyptologists pointed to stylistic evidence linking the Sphinx to Khafre's reign, the alignment with nearby temples, the lack of earlier references, the style of masonry. They argued that no Old Kingdom texts mentioned a monument predating the pharaohs. Schoch, however, maintained that geology doesn't bend to historical convenience. The stone itself, he argued, tells a different story. Supporting this possibility is the Sphinx Temple, built from massive blocks quarried around the same time. These blocks, some weighing over 200 tons, show similar erosion and are laid in a style that seems more primitive and in some ways more precise than structures from later periods. They may represent the remnants of a culture skilled in megalithic construction long before the pyramids. Even more intriguing is the suggestion that the Sphinx's face may have been recarved. Some researchers believe its head is disproportionately small for its body, possibly reshaped from an earlier lion or animal form. If true, this opens the possibility that the original monument predates dynastic Egypt by millennia and was repurposed in a later era. Still, the theory remains controversial. While Schoch has defended his findings with additional studies and debates, Egyptology has largely rejected a radical redating of the Sphinx. The conversation between disciplines, theology and archaeology, remains strained. Yet the broader implications are hard to ignore. If the Great Sphinx was first carved during the rainfall-rich period following the last glacial maximum, It suggests that an organized, sophisticated culture existed before the rise of what we call civilization. A culture with a vision to carve stone, align monuments, and leave behind an artifact that would outlast empires. It's not just about one monument. It's about what the Sphinx represents, an architectural and cultural inheritance whose roots may lie in an epoch long forgotten. Today, millions of tourists pass the Sphinx each year, unaware of the silent debate etched into its flanks. But for those who look closer at the weathering, the geological record, the buried foundation, a different story begins to emerge. One that suggests we may be standing on the edge of something deeper, not just a statue in the sand, but a fragment of a lost chapter in human, or perhaps pre-human, history. Few ancient accounts have stirred both fascination and skepticism, quite like the story of Atlantis. First detailed by Plato in his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, the tale speaks of a great island civilization that existed 9,000 years before his time, placing it around 11,500 years ago. According to his account, Atlantis was a powerful naval empire situated beyond the Pillars of Heracles, or what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. It possessed advanced technology, a complex political system, and enormous wealth, until it vanished beneath the ocean in a single day and night of misfortune. For many scholars, Atlantis is a philosophical allegory, a cautionary tale about hubris, designed to underscore Plato's ideas about governance and morality. But not everyone agrees. The level of detail in Plato's account is unusual for a parable. He describes Atlantis in geographic, political, and material terms: concentric rings of land and water, temples covered in precious metals, sophisticated irrigation systems, and a military powerful enough to challenge Athens. Plato attributed the story to Solon, a respected Athenian statesman who, during his travels in Egypt, allegedly heard the tale from temple priests. The Egyptians, he said, kept records of past catastrophes and civilizations that spanned tens of thousands of years, far beyond the historical scope accepted in classical Greece. This detail, Egypt as a conduit for forgotten histories, is significant. Many modern researchers have considered whether Atlantis might be more than myth. Could it reflect a distant memory, preserved orally or textually, of a real civilization that thrived and then disappeared at the end of the last ice age? Here, geology enters the discussion. At the end of the Pleistocene epoch, Earth underwent dramatic climate shifts. Around 12,800 years ago, a rapid cooling event known as the Younger Dryas interrupted global warming trends. Some scientists propose it was caused by a comet or meteor impact, an event that may have led to massive flooding, sudden temperature drops, and widespread ecological disruption. Glacial melts surged into oceans, raising sea levels by hundreds of feet and inundating vast coastal areas. This aligns intriguingly with Plato's timeline. Proponents of the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, like Randall Carlson and Graham Hancock, argue that global myths about floods, destruction, and lost golden ages may stem from real events witnessed by survivors of these cataclysms. In this view, Atlantis was not a singular city, but a stand-in for an entire network of advanced coastal cultures lost to rising seas. There is physical evidence to consider. Submerged structures off the coast of India, near the city of Dvarka, lie under 30 feet of water. While heavily eroded and difficult to date, sonar and dive expeditions suggest the presence of right angles and symmetrical stone formations, traits unusual in natural geology. Off the coast of Yonaguni, Japan, another underwater formation contains broad, terraced platforms that resemble man-made steps, though their origin remains controversial. In Cuba, divers have discovered large, megalithic blocks on the ocean floor in the area between Cuba and the Yucatan Peninsula. Some researchers argue these may be the remains of an ancient city, though skepticism remains high due to lack of direct archaeological study. The problem, as always, is evidence. Sea levels have risen over 400 feet since the last ice age, submerging ancient shorelines and making underwater archaeology prohibitively difficult. Add to this the tendency for coastal civilizations to build in materials that erode over time, wood, clay, and soft stone, and it becomes clear how easily history could vanish. Still, the broader pattern is provocative. Around the world, we find myths of a great flood, often tied to divine punishment or cosmic upheaval. From the Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh to the biblical tale of Noah, from Aztec stories of a sunken world to Hindu accounts of Manu and the deluge, the motif repeats across continents. What if these myths echo a shared trauma? A global event remembered in different tongues, interpreted through different gods, but pointing to the same lost chapter of human or pre-human experience, critics rightly caution against drawing hard conclusions from scattered evidence. The story of Atlantis, they argue, lacks archaeological proof. It is too perfect in design, too idealized in structure, and appears nowhere outside Plato's writings. They urge that we separate poetic narrative from empirical data. But the alternative, that Plato invented it all from scratch, seems equally problematic. His description is oddly specific, his source reputable, and his placement of Atlantis at the end of the last ice age aligns with real geological transitions. It's possible that Atlantis was a composite, a blending of older oral traditions, misunderstood Egyptian records, and philosophical intent. But even so, it may preserve a kernel of truth, that long before Egypt and Mesopotamia, before the great temples and cities we know, there may have existed civilizations wiped out not by war, but by water. We may never find Atlantis as Plato described it, but the search itself compels a reevaluation of what history means, how memory survives, and how little we know about the world before recorded time. Long before Egypt's pyramids rose from the desert, before Greece debated philosophy or Rome laid its roads, there was Sumer, a cradle of civilization that flourished and was now southern Iraq. The Sumerians are credited with creating the first known writing system, cuneiform, around 3200 BCE. But what they recorded has stirred enduring questions not just about history, but about the origins of civilization itself. Among the pantheon of Sumerian deities, one group stands out, the Anunnaki. The term Anunnaki translates roughly as those who came from the heavens, or princely offspring. In Sumerian mythology, they were powerful beings associated with the heavens and the underworld, often depicted as judges or intermediaries between gods and humans. Their names appear in some of the oldest clay tablets ever discovered, etched into wet mud over 5,000 years ago. According to the ancient texts, the Anunnaki came from a distant place, from the sky, and were responsible for shaping the world and bestowing knowledge upon early humanity. They are credited with establishing kingship, bringing laws, and overseeing the order of life and death. In some myths, they descend from a sky god named Anu and rule over the fates of humankind. This language has fueled interpretations far beyond traditional academia. In the late 20th century, author Zecharia Sitchin published a series of books, most notably The 12th Planet, arguing that the Anunnaki were not deities in a mythological sense, but extraterrestrial beings who visited Earth from a distant planet called Nibiru. Sitchin claimed that these beings genetically engineered Homo sapiens by combining their DNA with that of early hominins, creating modern humans to serve as a labor force, particularly for mining gold. According to Sitchin, this intervention explains the sudden emergence of advanced knowledge in early Mesopotamian society, astronomy, agriculture, writing, and urban planning, seemingly out of step with the known human developmental timeline. These ideas have sparked popular fascination. Books, documentaries, and online communities have embraced the notion of ancient astronauts, viewing ancient myths not as metaphor, but as misunderstood records of real events. But mainstream scholars overwhelmingly reject Sitchin's conclusions. Linguists point out that his translations of Sumerian and Akkadian texts are flawed and often speculative. Sumerian cosmology, they argue, reflects a symbolic worldview, not a literal account of interstellar contact. Terms like from the sky are poetic, not technological. Moreover, there's no direct archaeological evidence to support the presence of non-human intelligences in ancient Mesopotamia. The Sumerian achievements, while impressive, emerge gradually over centuries, rooted in observable environmental, economic, and social factors. Still, the broader questions persist. Why did civilization appear so rapidly in Sumer? How did the Sumerians gain such precise astronomical knowledge, such as the accurate length of the solar year, or the division of the sky into 12 zodiac signs, without modern instruments? And why do so many ancient cultures share similar motifs? Sky gods, civilizing visitors, and beings who descended to teach agriculture, writing, or metalwork. From the Dogon of Mali, who speak of star beings from Sirius, to the Hopis Kachinus spirits, to the Mesoamerican Quetzalcoatl, often depicted as a bearded, serpentine bringer of wisdom, this theme repeats across time and geography. The debate, then, is not just about the Anunnaki. It is about whether ancient cultures encoded real contact with something, whether divine, extraterrestrial, or symbolic, in the only language they had, myth. In this context, myth becomes more than fiction. It becomes memory, stylized through story, shaped by culture, but anchored in experience. Perhaps the gods were not aliens, but deeply influential figures, travelers, survivors of older civilizations, or even advanced humans whose knowledge seems supernatural to Stone Age minds. Alternatively, perhaps myths simply reflect the human impulse to explain the unknown through story. In this view, the Anunnaki are mirrors, reflections of our own struggle to understand creation, death, power, and the stars. Even without embracing extraterrestrial theories, the Anunnaki compel us to reconsider the roots of knowledge. The Sumerians knew things they should not have known so early. They created systems that would outlive empires. And they left behind a mythology so rich, so detailed, that it still reverberates in the modern mind. Whether gods or metaphors, the Anunnaki represent something ancient, authoritative, and unresolved, a reminder that the past holds mysteries not easily dismissed. Archaeology, at its best, is a meticulous science, careful, conservative, and evidence-driven. But like all sciences, it operates within paradigms, frameworks of thought that shape what researchers look for, how they interpret data, and which discoveries are deemed significant. This structure brings order, but it can also cast shadows. And within those shadows, the past may be hiding truths we've trained ourselves not to see. In the early 20th century, Arthur C. Clarke famously said, "Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic." In a similar vein, any anomaly that doesn't fit the dominant narrative risks being ignored, dismissed, or reclassified, not because it lacks merit, but because it doesn't conform to the model of history we've decided is true. Take the story of Dr. Virginia Steen McIntyre, a geologist who in the 1960s was part of a team analyzing volcanic ash layers at a site in Huitlaco, Mexico. Her team dated stone tools to around 250,000 years ago, a date that challenged the accepted timeline for human presence in the Americas. When she presented the findings, she was criticized, sidelined, and her academic career faltered. The tools remain controversial to this day. Or consider the Baghdad Battery, a set of artifacts dated to around 200 BCE. It consists of clay jars with copper cylinders and iron rods. Some researchers suggest it may have been an early form of galvanic cell, possibly used for electroplating. The mainstream view is that this is speculative at best, but the reluctance to investigate further says as much about bias as it does about evidence. And then there's the Piri Reis map, a 16th century world map drawn by an Ottoman admiral, which appears to show parts of the South American coast with surprising accuracy. Some claim it even hints at an ice-free Antarctic coastline, though this is hotly debated. The point is not whether these claims are all valid, but whether we are open to asking the questions they raise. Academic institutions tend to protect prevailing models. This is partly a defense against pseudoscience, but it also reflects human psychology. When careers, funding, and reputations depend on established timelines, radical revisions are not just intellectually threatening, they're professionally dangerous. New evidence often meets resistance not on scientific grounds, but on narrative grounds. Where are the tools? Where are the skeletons? These are fair questions. But when they become rhetorical weapons, used to preempt investigation rather than invite it, science becomes dogma. Modern archaeology has undoubtedly evolved. Advances in LiDAR scanning, ground-penetrating radar, and DNA analysis are revealing lost cities in jungles, buried structures in deserts, and forgotten migrations across continents. But there remains an invisible boundary. Discoveries must not rewrite too much of what we think we already know. Yet anomalies persist. Carved stones in Peru with what appear to be surgical scenes, though widely dismissed. Out-of-place artifacts found in ancient strata. Submerged sites with unexplained symmetry. These cases are often cast aside as hoaxes or misinterpretations, but few are systematically studied. The cost of credibility is high. We must ask, are we building history on the firm ground of evidence or the softer terrain of consensus? In his book, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, philosopher Thomas Kuhn argued that scientific progress doesn't move in a straight line. It moves in paradigm shifts, moments when too many anomalies pile up, and a new model emerges to explain them. But until that shift, the old model resists, sometimes fiercely. This dynamic isn't limited to distant pasts. Consider how long it took for continental drift to gain acceptance, or how the idea that humans coexisted with Neanderthals was once deemed absurd. Science corrects itself, but often slowly and only after substantial inertia. So what if there were once civilizations, not like us perhaps, but organized, skilled, even advanced in ways now lost, that rose and fell before the pages of history were written? What if signs of their existence are scattered in caves, ocean beds, and ice cores, but lie miscategorized because we've decided not to look? This isn't about conspiracy. It's about caution, about recognizing that knowledge grows not only by refining what we know, but by admitting what we don't. In the face of missing data, humility becomes a tool. It lets us keep digging, not just in the earth, but in the mind. Because history isn't just what's in books. It's also what lies beneath them. We began with a question. What if we're not the first? Not the first to build, to observe the heavens, to carve meaning into stone. Not the first to shape our world, and then lose it. From Göbekli Tepe's monumental enclosures to the weathered flanks of the Great Sphinx, from Plato's Atlantis echoing through flood myths across cultures, to the Sumerian Anunnaki and the blind spots of modern archaeology, a picture emerges. It's not a clear photograph. It's more like a weathered mosaic. Pieces missing, colors faded. Yet what remains is enough to suggest that the story of civilization may be far older and far more complex than we were taught. None of this demands that we abandon reason. Quite the opposite. The call here is not for wild speculation or fanciful theories. It is for disciplined curiosity, for the willingness to keep asking questions, even especially when the answers threaten what we think we know. Because history, as it turns out, is fragile. Cities rise and fall. Rivers shift course. Jungles reclaim stone. The sea swallows coastlines. And over millennia, even the memory of memory fades. It's not hard to imagine how a sophisticated coastal civilization existing during the end of the last ice age could vanish beneath rising seas. Or how myths could encode real events, refracted through generations until they become symbols, gods, and stories. We have only excavated a fraction of our planet's archaeological layers. The ocean floor remains largely unexplored. Vast tracts of jungle and desert hide what we've never even begun to search. And even among discovered artifacts, how many are misfiled, misunderstood, or simply dismissed? What if the next great paradigm shift isn't about new technology, but about a new humility? A new lens for looking at the past, not with certainty, but with openness? Science is not weakened by mystery. It's nourished by it. Every anomaly is a thread. Pull on it gently, and perhaps it unravels a deeper truth. Or perhaps it leads to nothing. But the pulling matters. The asking matters. The idea that there may have been civilizations before our own doesn't diminish us. It deepens us. It connects us to a longer timeline, a grander pattern, a sense that we are part of an unfolding story far older than our own recorded beginning. Imagine this. Beneath the forest floor of South America lie forgotten roads and earthworks that once connected city to city. Beneath the sands of North Africa, satellites detect geometric formations that may be man-made. Beneath the waves of the Indian Ocean and the Caribbean, structures rest, waiting for a diver or drone to notice what others ignored. And beneath our collective consciousness, there lies an instinct, a quiet knowing that we are not the first, that others came before us, that their stories, if ever fully revealed, would not be alien. They would be human, deeply human, full of ingenuity, awe, failure, and memory. There's a humility in considering lost civilizations. They remind us that what is built can be unbuilt, that what is known can be forgotten, that even the greatest cities can be reclaimed by moss, tide, or time. But there's also hope. If they rose, so did we. And if we forget, perhaps one day someone will remember again. In a way, the buried past isn't just beneath our feet. It's within us. In our myths, in our questions, in the quiet sense that the earth holds more than we've yet discovered. This isn't the end of the story. It's barely the beginning. So keep digging. Keep listening. And above all, keep wondering.